Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey everybody, Justin here with my good friend Marcus Miller, and he's a fellow life consultant that you have heard on this podcast before, him and his wife, Brianna.
Many a times. You probably know all my secrets with me and my wife.
All the secrets from getting a dog to getting married. Did you talk about your sex life yet?
No, but let's do it.
All right, let's go into the details of that. It led to this crazy thing called making a baby. So I want to know.
Yes.
I want to know specific positions that created this child.
Many a position. Actually, one. Only one made the baby.
Only one position made this happen. That's probably a few others were throwing in there while you were making it. Anyways, you guys, Marcus obviously is one of my really close friends and been a huge support system in my life. And because of that, we share a very special Tuesday, 3:00 time slot to hang out and talk about life.
It's true. Every Tuesday. Don't call me.
Yes, don't bother me at 3:00. I'm hanging out with Marcus. And so today, instead of just hanging out and bantering back and forth, we thought we'd do a podcast.
Yep. We're doing it right now. You're hearing it.
Marcus is like, truth. We've restarted this podcast so many times that I'm surprised you're still here, Marcus.
And I was like, at some point, it's not going to be a Tuesday 3:00 joke anymore. It's going to be 4:00.
It has taken a little while to get this off the ground, but I'm really excited to talk to you today because today we're going to talk about relationships and the changing and evolution of relationships. Because I think that the evolution and change process that happens within friendships and connections and families and stuff like that, it's always ebbing and flowing, but it creates a lot of high stakes emotions for people.
Totally. And the story you create around the ebb and flow of relationship will affect the trauma you experience in it. It'll affect your ability to reconnect. And so much of how we view and experience the change in relationships will affect our ability to reconnect in changes.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy to take a change in a relationship and view it as an identity statement. Like it's very easy to go like, oh, there must be something broken about me or something broken about them. It's very easy, especially if it doesn't feel like it changes well. But all of us as human beings we're growing and changing in our personalities, which causes change in how we relate inside of a relationship. Then there's just life. Life takes us. Like, for instance, Marcus, who has been one of my closest friends, all of a sudden packed up his bags, goes to San Diego, and completely abandons me.
True. And that was my intent. Abandonment.
And the message it sent to me is like, you can never trust people. Don't waste your time with friends. They'll just abandon you. That's
he said that in the cadence of a joke, but I think a little bit. There was a small child in there that was like, yeah, I know, bro.
Oh my God. No, actually, in my past, that absolutely would have been an interpretation. And that's an example of interpretations that we can have. Or there must be something wrong with me. I can't keep friends. Well, there might be things that are difficult about you that you do need to examine that drives people out of your life. But a lot of times we take the natural ebbs and flows as something more than what they are. And I know that for me, like, we're going to take some time here and Marcus is going to share a little about even his connection to people and what it means to him. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I've come to process relationships and the ebbs and flows of them. So you want to share a little bit about yourself in that?
Love to. Yeah. So I traditionally can probably, my like dysfunction part would be to want to go into control. I think there's a part of me that the idea of a friendship that lasts forever, like, oh, we'll be friends for 30 years, or I don't know. I think so much of my life I'd read the Bible like, how do I become a David and Jonathan, because that feels like the best kind of relationship. And it created high stakes around I should be perfect in friendship. If I do, I think I had a belief if I did good enough, then people would stay. I could be good enough to help someone connect the way I need them to. And it led to a lot of control. But really, it's because I was just afraid of the change. I was afraid of the pain of transition in friendships. Or relationships, even in marriage. Like, we had a kid recently, and there's a total shift in how we relate in certain ways.
And now that child is your mortal enemy because she is built.
No, actually, I love my baby. It is the best, hardest thing I've ever done.
It's changed because of you. But
something that Justin and I have talked a lot around, and even him like loving me in this area, is helping to shape, how do I view the transition in friendship? Am I viewing it like lost, like, oh, this is the death and this is the worst and it's crushing me? Or am I viewing it as there's a change happening here? And if I'm viewing change in the lens of a good God who brings the right relationships in the right season, then if I let that go, it means something else good is coming. And it means if I can let go, then someone they can bring the gift of who they are rather than being frustrated with me by who they're not. And I can receive the gift of who they are instead of wanting them to be who they're not.
Yeah. So going back to one, you had a lot of high stakes on relationships with this expectations that they've been littered with versus expectancy. Like, expectancy says, I don't know what this relationship, I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. But I do have an expectancy that there's going to be really good things that come out of it, whether it's a growth and development inside of me, inside of the other person. There's going to be good, fun moments. There's going to be heartfelt moments. Expectancy takes a relationship and just lowers the stakes completely. Expectations throw the relationship into a spiral of a situation.
Totally. And to be fair, I wouldn't say that I didn't feel that way about all relationships.
Right.
But there was like an undertow in in my trigger moments where that's where I'd want to like cling on to feel safe. But yeah, so we moved. We lived in Reading for a long time, hung out with Justin all the time.
Yeah.
And then we moved, and I had to figure out, all my relationships changed. What do I do? And we moved to San Diego, and when we moved, I made one friend. It's like hard to make friends. You don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And
especially it's easy for guys to have a difficult time creating those bonds and finding other guys that have the capacity to create healthy relational, emotional bonds and open up. Like, it's not the easiest thing.
Totally. Yeah. So I made two friends. One friend after 6 months moved away. The other friend after a year had some like life things happening, and the relationship just kind of like parted. And it was really hard for me to wrestle through the dynamic change and the pain around it. And then being able to view it. And this is why like it's so helpful to have feedback from friends, like viewing, can I see the gift of what it was? Even though there's pain because I invested for a year and now it's over, and I put my heart on the line and now we don't connect anymore. Can I still see the gift of what it brought to the table? Can I still see like, yeah, I needed a friend. I had no friends. I needed a friend. And even if it's just once a week, I had a place where I got connections. I wasn't alone. Can I see the gift in that? Mm-hmm. And then when that transitioned, I had a new friend come into the picture who was really fun. And I've talked to him a few times about this person, like, oh, there's this place where I felt tension, or this place where I am wanting him to have, or wanting this person to be able to do more of this area, be better at emotional health, and realizing, oh, actually, if I can let go of wanting people to be all the things that I need, then I can receive the gift of who they are. I can just receive that this person's so fun, and in a space where I have a wife and she's pregnant and we're having a baby and there's so much stress, I can go surfing and just have fun. And so when you can let go of the expectations, what you're saying, expectations versus expectancy, I can really enjoy who someone is, even if it's not all the things that I would like if I had a list of the friend that I need, they may not have all those things, but they have some things.
Well, one of the things that we're talking about is being able to see the gift that each person is, the expression that people are great at. So I talk about the idea of learning how to receive the love that people have the capacity to reflect. And when I talk about the idea of reflecting, it's like each of us has a capacity to reflect God's love. Like there's a creator who is expressing love to all of us, and we all have different levels of a capacity to reflect that love through different ways. And so I'm not sitting looking at singular individuals being like, I need you to reflect love in all these different facets.
Yeah, that's good.
As a whole, like I'm going, what is the portion you have capacity for? And so I'm looking into that and I'm like, oh, this person is an incredible gift giver. This person is an affirmation junkie. This person is an adventure junkie that brings adventure and play and fun. And this person is just super great at listening. Like I have one friend that they have the nature of faithfulness. Like there's tons of places where they're very messy in their life, but they have this ride or die for life thing that I actually like having, like someone around me that I'm like, I know I can call them. I could not talk to them for 15 years. I could pick up the phone and be like, hey, and they'd be like, you need me to help you bury a body somewhere? And I'm like, oh, I have like the idea that I have someone that exists in my life out there that has this sense of faithfulness. Oh, wow, that's more than enough. I don't need the other 10 people to be willing to bury bodies with me. Just one.
Just one person. I am not that person. Disclaimer, that's not me. If you're listening.
I didn't do it. But I think with that said, that's where we begin to actually look at the relationships around us and we begin to build immense amounts of gratitude.
Totally.
We also begin to realize that since no one person can fulfill everything, and sometimes we don't need what people have. Like, I'm not saying we don't need it at all, but there are seasons where it's like, oh, I don't need an adventure buddy right now. Like Marcus happened into my life in a season where I needed someone to sit on a couch buddy type deal where I was having panic attacks. And you could just sit and chill there and bring your energy low and just be with me, right? And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's okay. I don't feel lost when people transition out in certain seasons because it's actually opening up a doorway for something else that my heart might actually really need.
Totally.
When you think about, because again, people are really scared of transitioning, maybe out or even not just out, but a little bit of distance and stuff like that. What do you think the anxiety is inside of that for a lot of people?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. Yeah. So I think it's really scary, like that they're going to be abandoned.
Yeah, that's a core thing for a lot of people, yeah, a feeling
core there. Mm-hmm. If it's not a safety, if they can't figure out how to make sure it's safe, they're afraid they're going to get abandoned. They're going to get rejected. I think there's a fear of aloneness. People are so afraid. And I think we've talked about this difference between I feel alone in a moment. Like I feel loneliness in this moment versus the lie of aloneness.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
So I think people are afraid of what the lie of aloneness says is that you are intrinsically alone forever. Mm-hmm. That you are alone versus I'm having a moment of aloneness. And so I think that was hard for me moving, where I was like, oh, I felt aloneness a lot because the season I was in was more alone. I had you have one friend that's way more alone than in Reading. I had 10 friends.
Yes.
And so the aloneness, and I could, when I was in the first year of moving, I could feel the difference where I was like, it'd be fun to see someone versus I feel frantic energy from being alone. And I'm like, who can I call? Is there anyone I can spend time with? And it's because I felt the franticness of aloneness. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a huge one for why people want to control or want to try to mitigate relationships.
Yeah, I want to add to that thought of aloneness versus loneliness. Like we as human beings, like especially if you believe that there is a creator that like was divinely inspired in their creation of you and is present even when we can't see it. There's this idea that we are not alone, and we have never been alone. Like, even if I'm close this door, I'm sitting here in this room and there's no other human being in this space. On a spiritual and emotional level, I'm actually not alone. There's something that created me and that is within me in this space. Now, loneliness is something that's very real. And that's a feeling of like, oh, there's an unmet need and feeling like I'm disconnected and I'm feeling lonely. And so when a person can go, okay, the truth is there's a deep lie that says I have been alone, I can be totally abandoned and be completely alone, then of course we're going to go into panic, because we were designed in and through love. We were designed for relational connection. And if we believe that the needs that come through connection aren't going to be met, we're going to get totally frantic, versus like, oh, I'm going to get those needs met. There's a way to get care. There's a way to get comfort. I'm just feeling lonely in this moment. And in that loneliness is sadness, and there's some pain that I need seen. I need someone close to me. This is showing me that I need some comfort. Okay, not a big deal.
Yeah, I was actually thinking as you were saying that another reason that people go into control or frantic energy in relationships or struggle with the transition, the ebb and flow of it, is they don't know how to face pain.
Yeah.
Like, they're so scared of pain. Pain feels like such a big monster in their world that they would rather try to control and perfect a person or a relationship than be able to live open-handedly with the person and know, oh yeah, there might be pain involved, and that's okay.
I think about, so I have my friend Craig, who's one of my longtime best friends. So Craig goes back to my first couple of years of college out in film school. And Craig and we had so much fun together, and we shared faith as one of our expressions of connection, which was really cool. And after I got married, I moved away, and we just like both kind of separated and went on our separate journeys. And Craig's actually been on the podcast once. But in that separation, it's like I didn't lose someone. I had interactions with so many people along the way that I started building this, that started taking up those spaces. And I didn't forget him. I didn't throw him out. It was just like we were on separate journeys. And then the beauty is that when a new season of life came around where we had both grown in certain ways, we end up back into each other's paths, going deeper into relationship again and meeting each other in some really profound ways where there was some really deep need, which was incredible. And I didn't look at it as, oh, look, I lost Craig. I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, Craig was so instrumental in me having fun and connection in college, and there's a potential for him to revisit my life, and he did. And it was like we already had the history going 15 years back that we were able to pull from, like that foundational connection, to go deep in a season where we both needed love and care.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. I think about similar for me and my friend Andy. We became really good friends in college. And then I moved to Reading to do the school there, BSSM. And then, so we were separate for like 3 years. And then he moved to Reading and was my neighbor. And I was like, oh, I saw him almost every day. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to San Diego and he moved to Cincinnati. So like we've had these ebbs and flows where we have really connecting seasons. And then we have seasons where it's like we call every once in a while. And then he came back into my life in a really like everyday kind of way. And then we've transitioned again because we both moved separate. And so it's like it was like the thread is there weaving in and out. Sometimes it's like a consistent thread. Sometimes it's a once in a while thread, but it's not the catastrophic, like, oh, we're not friends anymore, or you've abandoned me, or our friendship is over. There just have been shifts. And if I can accept that and know that God is bringing the right thing in the right season, then the shift doesn't feel, there's a sadness, sure, like, oh, it changed, that's sad, but it doesn't feel like a loss.
Well, and that's that. Okay. So when you're talking about the idea of, say, bringing people in the right season, like that's under the idea that there's a really good dad that is involved in our stories and that wants to, it sees needs and wants to actually meet those needs and also grow and develop us. Like, oh, there's a dad co-creating my life, that if we are saying yes to, like, if we're extending an invitation to our dad and saying like, hey dad, I'd totally love for you to participate in my journey with me. There's like the potential for a really good dad who goes, absolutely. I see that you have these needs and I'm going to, like, this person is choosing this route to walk down this route. Maybe they're going, whatever that journey is that they're going on. I totally know that your heart needs someone who has the ability to express compassion and you need that for this season. And so I'm going to kind of nurture you along and bump you into them and let that kind of flourish as you guys like step into a relationship together. But again, that's under the idea that we're not abandoned on this earth and that there's a really good dad involved inside of our stories. And then we begin to break that, again, that sense of abandonment and go, okay, so it's not the end of the world if somebody walks out or if somebody needs a transition or if there's a disconnection. Like I look back at some of my relationships. I had a couple of friends that really betrayed me and it was super painful and something I had to process through. And after I could get through the pain of the betrayal and how I triggered about that, I could actually go revisit it and be like, man, but look at the gifts they were. Like,
totally.
There were these things that I really needed that they brought to the table. And at the time, I didn't actually know how to receive the depth of that. And as I've matured, I've been able to look back and go, oh, that was really needed. And I can now feel the weight of how loved I was, even though they made a mess. And I made a mess in a bunch of people's lives. It's not like they just made messes. We all made messes.
Totally. Yeah, I can think out to friends where I'm like, oh, I was living the best I knew how, and I was being codependent, and I was being like, my behavior led to some of this like fallout in scenarios. I'm like, yeah, and I was loving them the best I knew how, and I think that love probably changed parts of their lives.
Yeah.
And there was pain.
Absolutely. And I think that I wanted to share just real quickly about my story, because for me, we've talked about me being being identified as a Enneagram 8, and part of the identification of that is that there's this deep need for safety and protection, and it took me. It's a lot less now, but it took me a long time to form bonds with people. Like it would take me like a couple of years to feel like, all right, we are going to be long-term friends now. And I feel really safe. I can share anything with this person. So if somebody after all that time walked out, it would be really devastating for me. And because it felt like I was giving away a piece of myself. And it's not just like I let them in, but here's a bunch of me I'm going to hand over to you. And now you're going to leave with it and take off with it. And so it was always feeling like a sense of loss. And what would be the word? Like a deficit. The word would be deficit. Yeah. Felt like I kept experiencing deficit. But then that stuff all began to transition as I began to see what each person was giving. And I'm like, oh no, I'm overflowing with treasure. Like it's this overwhelm of treasure being brought into my life that I'm consistently benefiting from. And I'm looking at the idea of this eternal perspective that when it's all said and done, like each person is bringing something to deposit in my life, and I'm depositing something inside of their lives. And then we're moving throughout our lives, interacting with other people. And what it's meant to do is we're supposed to be, to me, we keep giving love away, exchanging expressions of love to each other, growth and development and healing and new thought perspectives. Even those people that made the biggest messes in my life, they were bringing gift to me. They were teaching me how to have a voice. They were showing me like things that I actually don't want to do, not even in an attacking way. Like, oh, the way that they handled that situation, I don't want to handle life like that. That's so good.
Sure.
It's a great mirror for me to think about how I'm managing myself and how I want to develop in my life going forward. And when I look at it from an eternal perspective, it's like we're all giving away gifts to each other and receiving stuff from each other that then leads to this, like after we die and leave this world, there's this community of people that all have these shared experiences and deposits that we've all given each other that gives us a reason to come back together and even get to share the stories of what happened from those points of contact, whether they were relationships that lasted a week, 6 months, 50 years, like whatever it was, like what was the exchange that happened? But I think that if we don't look at life through an eternal perspective of it's more than just a short, finite amount of time, it'll always feel like I don't have much more time with relationships, and I need to get everything I can out of this right now, and then they're just going to disappear. And there's just, again, so much high anxiety when it's a finite amount of time and that it's not unto the potential of something bigger.
Yeah, I love that. And even like as you're saying that, I'm thinking through, if I don't, because you're talking about this idea of a good God and creating safety and peace in our own world because we believe there's a good God who wants to bring good things to us. If I don't have that in the background of my mind, then I'm really frantic in relationships to get my needs met because I'm not sure there's someone who knows I have needs and wants to take care of me.
Yeah.
So I think like when I am not functioning at peace with myself, like triggered Marcus is really afraid in relationships. Well, what if you can't meet my needs? What if my needs don't get met? Oh, if this person can be fun, but they can't validate, then what if I never get validated? And so if I don't have a peace inside of me that my needs will get met and I don't need this person in front of me to meet all of those needs, then if I don't have that belief or understanding, then I'm going to be pulling on that person. I'm going to want to change that person. I'm going to not want to let them go. This is like a funny one that I just thought about, but one of my good friends is like thinking about moving to a different part of San Diego, which like do whatever you want. But I'm aware like, oh, if you living 2 minutes down the street versus living 30 minutes when I have a newborn is different.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that's like, yeah, but I actually want people to go on their journey. If I believe that I'll get what I need, then yeah, move over there, try that part of the city, move somewhere else because I don't need to control you to get what I want.
Yeah.
Because I believe the thing I need will come to me.
That's so good. I recently had another one of our mutual friends head down to San Diego from here and you got to inherit them. You son of a bitch. But even when we sat down and had our closing statements,
sounds so dramatic.
We had some really heartfelt moments on my back porch as I smoked a cigar and hung out with him. And I didn't feel like it was one of those times again where I was like, I'm not losing anything, especially after you transitioned to San Diego. That was tough. Like the first few months, like I did get hit hard and I was like, I don't even know how to communicate right now. Like I'm like, my heart's catching up with the reality that my friend's gone out of this space, but totally. I've progressively even gotten better from there. Like when he was like, yeah, I'm going to go and stuff. I was like, that's so cool that I had so many bonding moments with him. And I walked with him through some of the most horrific situations that he went through difficult. I'll use like incredibly difficult situations in his life. And, I got to experience all those aspects of him and all of his play. And I'm like, that's so cool. When I go down to San Diego, I have like a whole community of people that are down there and that I get to experience so much with them there. And it's like, I've been thinking about a lot of my friends because where we live, it's kind of a hub where people come and go from around the world. And so you'll make a friend for a year and then they're gone. They've gone back to a whole other nation or a whole other city, a state, whatever. But I'm like, I literally have friends all over the world because of the gift of the coming and going. And I have the potential to go experience them in their lives all over the world. And it's just like this idea of abundance has overtaken me inside of it.
Totally.
Instead of loss, it's just abundance.
Totally. Which is huge, because when you can shift that perspective, then you can see all the gifts that are there for you instead of all the things that like you're losing.
Yeah.
That's a different way of viewing life. Like, oh, there's so many gifts that are for me, that I've gotten to know or experience, versus I'm losing all of these things.
Isn't it interesting how we feel like things are so permanent? It's like, even when I'm talking about the idea of an eternal perspective, the permanence of something it like disappears. Like the permanence of disconnection. Even if you and I have a complete falling out today, that's not permanent. If you believe,
don't say that.
But
too far, Justin. Too far.
You take it back now. But if we believe in something that transcends this finite world that we live in, if we believe in the idea that there is an infinite love in a space of infinite love where God exists and where our lives continue on past this space, there is something so powerful about the idea of like, there's no falling out too big on this earth that won't have the potential for ultimate reconnection and reconciliation and redemption in another space that doesn't come with all the limitations of our messiness of our humanity.
Totally.
And so there's even a relief inside of that. Like, I can sit, even while I'm talking, and I can sit and think of like 3 or 4 friends that I deeply loved in my past, where we had fallings out, that we may never have a redemptive moment here in this space. That's okay. We're going to have a reconnection conversation, probably in a way where we can take even ownership for things that we said or did, free from any semblance of shame, that will be so beautiful in those interactions. But we can only have that kind of abundant mindset if we lose our sense of limitation, even in the way that we're living here on earth.
Yeah. I love that. I think of it like, as you're saying that, I was thinking about how Paul Young says, if anything matters, and everything matters.
Yeah.
And the idea, like, actually, if like any spot of love matters, it's like, if love comes and it reaches me and it affects me, it can't, because the relationship has a pain spot, can't unaffect me. Love met me and it changed something in me and it spoke to me. And just because the relationship shifts or changes doesn't remove the love that was deposited into me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that in itself, just even being able to meditate on that, like, yeah, but the love that they left did something for me.
Totally.
I think,
even as you're saying, like, I have friendships where I'm like, oh, that like went to the shitter, or like that ended really hard. But I'm like, oh, but I can see where we both brought something to each other, and that love mattered, and it did do something in me, and it did something in them. And I don't know what the eternal effect is in the love that we brought to each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And our stories haven't played out, right? Like, so oftentimes we're so quick to make a summation out of a season. So we want to summarize and make a summation out of an entire person or being or season when we haven't even walked out the fullness of our life. We don't even have a full perspective on what went on inside of someone else, how they developed, how they grew, what happened inside of them. We don't have a full perspective on the ripple effect of how we grew and developed on the other side of it. And so again, we make these quick judgments on stuff rather than being like, I don't know, it's too soon to tell. It's too soon to tell. I'm not going to categorize that situation as good or bad. I'm just going to go, okay, it was, but I know that it brought beauty and I know that it brought pain, because we are humans and there's pain and there's beauty. Like tomorrow, if Abby and I went through a divorce, which easily could have been something that happened. I mean, we've had our troubles and had to grow and develop and fight through some really difficult stuff. But if we actually went through a divorce, I wouldn't look back and be like, what a waste of time. I wouldn't look back and be like, that was stupid because I experienced so much pain. I wish I'd never done it. I'd look back and go, man, there was a lot of struggles and pain that we both went through. And look at all the beautiful things that developed in each of us. Although we hurt each other in these ways, what are the ways that we grew? And like, as I, obviously there's ebbs and flows in a grieving process, but I would still be able to and would sit down and be able to go like, man, thank you, Abby, for the part of your life that you chose to share with me. Even through the ups and downs, here are gifts that you left.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't, again, the idea, one of the things that's really hard for a lot of people is that oftentimes we believe this unconsciously, that if I acknowledge the love in the way that I was positively affected, it means that my pain doesn't matter. It almost, totally. It's like, oh, that will negate my pain if I actually sit and get connected to the good things that were brought to me.
Totally. Or even like that is true. Or I'm so connected to the pain and the broken part that I can't see the good in it.
Right.
Like, it's like I'm blinded. Like, I'm so into the negative. I'm lost in it. I'm lost in the pain that I can't see the positive that actually came out of it.
Yeah. And there's appropriate times for that. Like when relationships are transitioning, it's like, yeah, there's part of me that has to have grief. I know that there's one of my friends that went through a really rough divorce recently. He was sharing with me, like, he was even in his process of pain with it, and it didn't go down well. Like it wasn't like there was some really big wrong done towards him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was very unjust. But I also watched inside of it that he didn't go into this deep vilification. There were places where he was able to go, man, like these are some really good things. And even if I were to go back, I'd still do it again in some aspects, because it was like these things were really necessary for me. And I'm like, totally. Oh man, that's so profound. And I also watched as he gave himself the room to really grieve and not just be like, oh, hey, this has been really good, but like, oh, I need to be really sad. I need to cry really hard. I need to like process a bunch. But I think that that's such a balanced thing. And it takes a lot of maturity to do that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, in the past couple of years, I've had a friend break up. That's what I call it. When it's like, oh, we're really close, but then it like had a falling out. Mm-hmm. And I both felt the pain and processed, and I practiced telling myself, why does someone do the behavior like that? Like, why would that happen? Because I knew if I create a villain, it's going to be hard to see the gifts they brought to the table.
Yeah.
So I literally practiced humanizing them. Why does someone do that? Doesn't mean my pain isn't real. It doesn't mean I wasn't processing, but I was understanding why someone does a certain behavior, because I knew at the end of this, I want to be able to have a tenderness where I can receive the love that they had to give me. And I also owned like what was my behavior that was playing a part in it.
Yeah.
But I had to do both. I had to grieve it and feel it because it was painful, and the change was painful, and the way it went was painful. And I wanted to be able to not create a villain out of them where I could never see the good they brought to the table.
Well, and that's the biggest thing, like you're pointing out, the dehumanization process. So when we have pain, we're very quick to, like you were saying, vilify or dehumanize, like reduce somebody down to just this horrible existence. Like that, it's that black and white thinking versus nuance. Like every human being is nuance. Every human being has a capacity for destructive elements and creating painful situations. I do them, you do them, we all have them. But when we're in pain, a lot of times we want to just eradicate these parts of their humanity that are good and be like, well, that never existed. Nothing was good about them. And it doesn't serve us well at all. Mm. Like it creates a world where we feel deeply unsafe, because then we start believing that the world is filled with villains, and we become victims to situations. And we also don't see our role, and we don't have compassion for our own humanity when we do make mistakes in that thinking. Yeah.
And we miss out on so much of love. Like actually, if love is like food, anytime I get love, it's feeding me. And if I'm viewing life like that, then I need the perfect person for me to be able to have love. Because what if they hurt me? What if they abandon me? What if they don't show up? What if they don't respond well in the scenario? And so I'm keeping them at a distance instead of actually getting to receive the love they can bring to the table.
I don't even know if this is a good example. It's just kind of popping in my head, but I imagine like a T-bone steak. You're going to eat, like you're going to be sitting there eating the T-bone steak and you're not going to be able to eat the bone, right? You're going to eat the steak is going to feed you. It didn't mean it was a bad steak because you couldn't eat a portion of it.
Totally.
Like it's just like this part of it is not digestible. This part of it doesn't benefit me, but the rest of this steak is so great and so fantastic. And you don't hate the steak and be like, terrible steak. It had a bone in it. I'm like, well, it's a steak. It's going to have a bone. It's a T-bone steak. It's going to have a bone in it. And we are humans. We're going to have messiness inside of our relationships. And it didn't mean that me eating that steak like the meat that I could eat didn't mean it didn't nourish me. It absolutely did. Totally. There you go. Life is like a T-bone steak. Relationships with people.
Totally. It really is. So we are wanting in our fantasy imagination of safety, we're wanting someone to be perfect so that we won't get hurt.
Yeah.
And if they're perfect enough, then I can receive love with my walls down because they won't hurt me. And that is just not real.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're wanting that, when that's someone that you can receive, then you will keep any love outside of that away because it's not as safe as the picture in your head of the perfect person.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting too, because like one of the detriments that I found in my past is that there were painful moments that people created that were truly painful.
Mm-hmm.
But I took one painful moment, and to minimize the pain, you know, you talked about vilifying people. It goes so much deeper. Like I took one moment and then I started rewriting the story and seeing all these other behaviors as things that they didn't care about me and they didn't love me. Like I had to paint them like into a corner of like, you're really not a good person. Here's all the terrible things that you did. And what it did is it actually, like, I slowly took it from this moment was painful to look at all these horrible things you've done and building bigger cases against them. And I kept pushing that love further and further out, even in that, by dismissing thing like, yeah.
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 Yeah. So all I have to say, pain is real in relationships. And if you can't reconcile with the fact that receiving love also means receiving pain, and receiving pain is the only way to fully let love in.
Yeah.
Like if you can't reconcile that, you will actually miss out on so much love that God in humanity has to offer you. God in the form where like literally love, God created humans for connection with each other and with him. And we will miss out on part of connection if we cannot let flawed humans come into our world and be a part of bringing love to us.
What's been one of your, I don't know if this would be applicable, but what's been one of your biggest fears inside of relationships?
Yeah, probably. I mean, one of my biggest fears in general is that, and this is, I often feel afraid that if I'm not what someone wants, they will abandon me. That is a big one for me. So I will try to do the right behavior. And then what the trap I'll get in is I'm doing all the right behavior. I don't know why it's not enough for you to show up for me. So I'm believing if I do enough of the right things, then you'll be able to show up for me the way I need, instead of I'm going to show up as who I am and you can show up as who you are. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I will get in this spin where I'm like, I don't know why you can't do this thing for me or change this thing for me. I've done all these things for you. Which really is, I abandon myself in all these areas. And sometimes it's not all abandonment. There's a part of, I actually love people and I want to show up in ways that they feel loved. But there's a level of, I'm doing it in hopes that if it's enough, then you will show up in a way that I feel safe and secure.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot myself. And a lot of that's, I think, shifted it down to like, this is who I am. I cannot hold anyone to a standard of this. I'm not doing this so I can get this back. I'm going to enter into this relationship giving this out freely. like, yes, I hope that someone has a capacity to meet me in similar ways, like throughout of all of my interactions, but I'm not going to have a specific interaction trying to go like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get this back. And what's really cool, again, that goes back to lifting expectations off of people and having expectancy. And it became like, no, who do I just simply want to be?
Yeah.
It wasn't a negotiation for love anymore. And I think that that's one of the other things that happens inside of relationships is like people are constantly trying to negotiate unspoken negotiations for love inside of a relationship. And then it becomes even more exacerbated, the pain inside of it, when people don't meet those unspoken expectations that you're negotiating.
Totally.
Yeah. Man, really like talking about relational stuff with you.
Thanks, friend.
Do you have any other thoughts on this?
My last thought really is I challenge you to sit and think through what are the gifts of love from, like, literally I would sit and think through relationships and think, okay, what are the gifts of love that relationship brought into my world?
Mm-hmm.
What is the part of God I got to know better? The thing that my heart needed that I got to know. And if you hit a relationship, you're like, oh, I can't think of it because there's pain. I invite you to process through that pain and actually get healing there so that you can see the gift, because there is love on the other end of that process if you will look at it.
I think, on that note, I did that. I basically a while ago sat down when I was trying to connect with the depth of love that had been available in my life all along. And I wrote down key friendships. I took high school, I took college, post-college, marriage, or early marriage, later marriage, where I'm at. And I wrote down a list of people, anyone that I had deep connection with. And I was like, oh, like I looked at, okay, these are all the people I discounted. And I put them over into a category, and I was like, all right, I'm going to take some special time with this. Cause I was able to write down the people that I hadn't discounted that weren't like a severe fallout. I sat and wrote, it was easy to write all that down, but I took these other people, especially that I discounted, and I go, I'm going to dig in to see their humanity. I'm going to try to imagine what their story was that led to some of their behavior. And I'm going to imagine like, what role did I play? I'm going to imagine how was like my story, how did it play a role in that? Like, oh, okay, there's a reason why I responded that way. I'm not horrible in that. And then I tried to imagine like and connect with what was the things that they were depositing and leaving behind. And that was like super profound, because there was so much evidence because of painful situations that said, love never lands. Like it's pointless to have friends. It just like ends up getting taken away anyways. That I really broke any sense of that lie in writing out that process with them. And I took people out of what I called a dead zone. I had a dead zone where once you hurt me enough, you got put in the dead zone. And it's almost like the relationship never happened. And so it added to that lie of aloneness, because all of a sudden the people that were scattered throughout those seasons disappeared. And there were seasons conceptually at a heart level where
you were alone,
where I was completely alone, because I removed their love. I removed the relational connection, and then I threw them in a dead zone. I was like, screw you, you hurt me.
Yeah.
And so once I started littering my past with all the people, like the reality that there were people in there, I was like, my whole world has been filled with love and pain.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's been an ample amount of connection points inside of it. Did you have more to say?
Caveat, just if you're hearing and you're like, so now I have to be like friends with that person who really hurt me? No,
not at all.
We're not saying you have to go and be like redo friendship with them. We are saying it is a gift to you in your life if you can receive the love that they did bring to the table for the season they were there.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, like I still have boundaries with people like that. And I've also have a tender heart to repair processes, which I've had people come back and repair processes. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like what a redeeming situation.
Totally. And even for me, I'm thinking, what is the fruit I want in my life? If I have dead zone places, there will be a wall that I'll have in new relationships, because I actually believe that there is an unsafety that exists so much that like the dead zone is there.
Yeah.
And so I've had to like, I can feel, because I was in Reading for years and there is a lot of transition. And if you don't, and there's a part of that that's really painful where it's like, oh, people can leave at any moment. And then I moved and I'm like, oh, I can feel a protective part I'm working on that I can feel. It's like, oh, I feel like people can leave at any moment and that feels scary. If I'm not in their headspace, it can feel like, why try?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, yeah, people can leave and also people come. Yeah, people can leave, but what are the gifts they gave you while they were there?
Yeah, it's so good. So yeah, homework, go write some of that down, what we were just describing there. If you realize that you have a dead zone, it's time to decide to ask yourself, like, why do I have this dead zone? Do I need the dead zone? I actually had to tell myself it's time for me to get rid of the dead zone. Part of getting rid of the dead zone was me forgiving people. It was me forgiving myself. It was me realizing, connecting to pain, that I was like, oh, I didn't even grieve that. I just put them in the dead zone because there was so much pain. Maybe I need to touch the pain and get through it, because I don't want a dead zone dictating how I perceive my future relationships. Because if we allow this thinking from these former relationships to continue on, like any potential person that comes into our life that relationship is already being pre-affected by our judgments and our biases that we've created because we haven't resolved how we're approaching relationships in the first place. So we're not even setting ourselves up for a deep amount of success moving forward, because we already have our guards up and self-protections and all of that stuff. So write those things down. Think about that stuff. Any other final thoughts, Marcus?
Nope. Love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you guys, if they want to connect to you, how could they connect to you?
You can find me on Instagram, marcus.j.miller, or marcusmillerconsulting.com.
Ooh, like, the
website.
Yeah, go to marcusmillerconsulting.com to check him out. And hey, if you're being impacted by thinking about this process of relationships and how to start reframing the way that you connect to the world around you, please rate, review, subscribe, and share. And if you're having a hard time figuring out how to implement these things because of pain inside of you, I would suggest going to our website, Justin and Abby, that's abi.com. Get the Compassion Project. It helps you connect to your own soul. It helps you to better humanize yourself and humanize other people. And it really begins that process of repair, just getting connected to the power of compassion. So you can find that there, and sign up for our updates and stuff on our website. You can get a free book, From Crappy to Happy, a fun little piece that I wrote. And yeah, that's what I got for you. You guys, give Marcus an applause. Go ahead. Standing ovation for Marcus. Well done, Marcus. All right, go away. Bye now.